Welcome to a Wonder Junkie podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Anderson. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate the show. That helps people to discover it on Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, and it's also on Rumble. Enjoy the episode.
Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows. Nobody has the faintest idea. The best guesses are lies. You may be sure of it.
All right, Elyse, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Ryan.
Yeah, Alina Canner hooked us up and told me I should really speak to you. And so I started diving into some of what you're doing in the world and found it fascinating. So I checked out your podcast with Alexis Cohen multiple times. You had two of those with her, it looks like.
Yes.
And looked at your website, and I've been following you along on Instagram. And it's cool. You have done some really cool things in the world, and you're doing cool things.
Thank you so much. It's exciting. It's fun. And, I think a lot of my life I spent so wrapped up in depression and anxiety that I'm like, you know what? Now it's finally time to have some fun in my life and actually enjoy and overcome a lot of fears and obstacles and challenges that I had previously.
That's amazing. Yeah, you can tell you're high vibration and happy, and it's contagious. So I'd love to go back into history and find out some of what you went through to get to who you are today, and then talk a little bit about how you serve the world now. It seems like you really teach a lot of clients more of a holistic approach to health. And you're way outside the box. You're a Checkie. I love people that study through Paul Chek. I call them Checkies.
Yes,
And
we all do.
you just you don't think typical. You are, probing the edges as you would. So I'd love to hear how you got this way.
Yeah. So growing up in my, late childhood, early teens, I started to really struggle with pretty significant anxiety and depression, eating disorders, OCD, really to the point where I wasn't even able to function in the world. Like I stopped going to school for a little bit. I stopped interacting with people, and it was debilitating. It was totally crippling. And through that process, ended up being put on a lot of medication. So pretty much every SSRI that was on the market at that time, I tried. I was on Xanax daily for many, many, many years, stimulants, sleep medication. And I was on that throughout high school, college, grad school. And I started working at Bellevue Hospital after grad school. Are you familiar with Bellevue?
No.
Okay, so it's the flagship for the New York City public hospital system. So we are the location that, if EMS or NYPD pick up a psychotic person on the street in Union Square, they go to Bellevue. And we also have a floor that is in conjunction with Rikers, the prison. We have a prison floor in the hospital.
Wow.
It's a very, very intense hospital. It's also the training program for NYU. So I was working there for 5 years in the psych ER and the inpatient psych unit on so many medications myself, so burnt out, really, really struggling. And I just happened to fall into starting to personal train on the side and be in a gym that was the hub of Czechies and also people who studied something called Z Health, functional neuroscience. And that's when I really started to get exposed to all this work around nervous system regulation and integration, training the brain to improve performance, taking more of a holistic approach to just your body, your mind, your spirit, eating better, moving better, breathing better, all those things. So I started studying that. Simultaneously, I was working at Bellevue, and I started to get off my medications, but I was seeing how the hospital was running. And it's only about medication, right? Your hospital stay is only covered if you are taking medication. So our patients were not getting any sunlight. They were not getting any movement. The food was awful. And I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, I'm getting off my meds and I'm feeling better, things that I never thought were possible. And here we are telling these people that they have to be on their medications all of their life, and we're not doing anything to actually heal them. So I definitely started to have, I feel like kind of this spiritual conflict of like, I'm doing this work, but I don't really necessarily agree with it. And that's when I started to get into my own private practice while I was working at Bellevue of taking more and more conventional psychiatry, psychology training and merging it with functional neuroscience, Eastern medicine, holistic medicine practices. And the personal training component of it, movement, breath work, and bringing it all together to really help people start to heal at the root and, really change their lives in a way that I don't think many of them thought was possible.
That's incredible. And when you look back now, when you were young, can you tell what were the major factors that led to you seeming to go off the rails or start to feel so bad?
Yeah, I grew up in a home with a lot of domestic violence, and I can't even remember a time that I wasn't operating in a complete sense of overwhelm and panic and high sympathetic tone. And I realized that even throughout my 20s, that was just, it just lived in my body. This was what was happening constantly. It was just always going, 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 constant state of panic and anxiety. And, when you grow up in a home where there's just so much chaos, that's what your brain and body knows. And that's what finds
Mm.
safety in. And stillness was really, really scary. I started working 4 years ago with a somatic therapist. And I remember doing this work and just lying there, trying to do these somatic meditations. And it was absolutely torturous because sitting still felt impossible. So that's what I was used to. And then on top of that, I start working at the most chaotic psychiatric emergency room, arguably in the country. And it's just reinforcing that nervous system dysregulation, right?
Wow.
You're sitting there doing notes and there are patients banging on the wall and screaming and having crises constantly. And it was kind of like, okay, well, I'm used to that, like this is normal. So that's really where it got started in my childhood.
Awesome. And yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to this uncomfortability with stillness, the nervous system being overreactive. What
Yeah.
were some of the initial experiences you had that allowed you to start to feel okay slowing down and connecting with your body, your emotions? Was it transformational experiences, or how do you approach that early on?
The thing that really helped me be able to slow down was the somatic therapy that I was doing, but I felt like it took too long to be able to actually get there. Like I was working with my coach for 1.5, 2 years before I actually understood what it meant to drop into my body, get out of my overthinking mind and into my feeling body. So I was able to eventually get there, but it just didn't feel like a very efficient way of doing it. And I thought to myself, you know what? I want to help my patients be able to do that too, but I don't want them to feel complete torture or resistance to it. So what I started doing was thinking about, okay, I have all this training in functional neuroscience and movement and from the Czech Institute. What can I do to help my patients stair step their way down to be able to sit still? So I started grabbing all these different tools. I got a vibration plate in my office and got the vagus nerve stimulators and colored glasses and teaching them all different types of breath work and self massage, talking about nutrition and how important that is in helping their nervous system to feel safe, getting outside, all the things that we understand now are really important that are not considered in the conventional psychiatry space, that are just part of being human, that when things are not operating well, your brain is just not going to feel safe, right? Helping them start to find safety through those things and then slowly bringing them to a place where it felt more comfortable to drop into their body. It didn't feel so scary to feel the sensations coming up. And that's a lot of the work we do with them now is being able to find a sense of calm in their body.
That's amazing. I saw on your website too, you offer a course that helps people to meditate, that people that hate meditating or think it's just treacherous. Is this all tied into that, like some of the approach that you go through in that course?
Yes, it is exactly. I chose my four favorite exercises, the exercises that are my favorite and typically are my patients' favorites, for helping people to be able to get into their body a little bit more so that they can eventually slow down and be able to meditate and actually enjoy it. And
Yeah.
what I love is that I have patients now that when I started with them 1.5, 2 years ago, there was no way they could sit still. It felt impossible. And now they come in and they go, "Oh, can we do the somatic work today? Can we be still?" And they'll ask, can I do some cranial sacral or Reiki with them, which is really helpful too. That touch component can be so beneficial for so many people. Not Not everybody, of course, if people have significant trauma, sometimes it's not helpful, but for some people, it just really helps calm them down. So
Mm,
it's really cool to see that transformation. And I tell people, look, it's not going to happen overnight. It does take time, but we're going to get you there. And it's really, really exciting when it
that's
happens.
amazing. That's so cool that you're sharing that, because I know I share breath work for the last 5 years in a very conservative, slowing down way with people. And a lot of it is like giving them permission to basically be whatever they are in that field of their experience. Like, hey, if you want to just lay there and listen to us get weird, do that, basically, you know.
Yeah.
And a lot of people come, and it's the hardest thing in the world is to slow down and to feel. And so I don't judge that. And I think it's a beautiful thing to just try to observe it and cultivate a relationship with the uncertainty and uncomfortability of it, but also not be hard on yourself when you're not feeling good slowing down. And just if
Yes.
you're fidgety, be fidgety. You know, maybe play around with it. But so many people feel like they're so concerned about doing it wrong that it actually keeps them from even wanting to try it in the first place. So I'm always big on just exploration, curiosity instead of judgment. And I'm sure you approach your clients with a similar way. And when you went through Paul Chek's stuff, it's like that's a huge and deep, daunting thing to take on. How was that for you, and what did you learn most out of that experience? Because he's such a rich, fully rich with experience man. He has so much
Oh my
knowledge.
gosh. He's so amazing. Yeah. I went through his holistic lifestyle coaching program. And then I actually ended up working with his wife, Angie Check, for 2 years after that. And we still work on and off together now. But so that in itself, working with her really enforced the material that I learned in the class. But the biggest thing is that there's so much information at the Czech Institute. In terms of tools that I use, a lot of the Tai Chi that he teaches and the different zone exercises for the different chakras has been so powerful for my patients, because if they're having trouble speaking and their throat chakra is closed, we'll do the throat chakra Tai Chi specifically for that area. So that's been
Mm,
really, really valuable. And I find that people who have trouble slowing down and being still, the Tai Chi is really helpful because it's involving movement with breath, and it's helping them to get into their body and slow down without feeling like they have to lay there and be completely still. But when I decided to start studying at the Czech Institute, which I had been studying Paul's work informally for a decade before, as I'm sure it sounds like you're pretty familiar with his work too. A lot of people are, and he has so much amazing material online. So when I finally started, my holistic practitioner, who I've worked with for many, many years, who was also a very early Czechie, he said, listen, when you go do this, you're doing it for you. Like, do not expect that you're going to be there focusing on your patients. Like, you have to be ready to do the work on yourself, which I think is always the case, but to go with that mindset is very helpful. And I for me, the biggest takeaway was something Paul actually called me out on. He had said to me, he'd said in class, he had called me out and was like, you got some serious work to do for this world. Like, he's like, go out there and get it done. And he came up to me afterwards and he said, you just have to learn to love yourself. Like, go, like, trust yourself and love yourself.
mm,
And he like saw, he sees somebody and he can just tell exactly what it is that they need. And I was like, okay, all the money I spent on the class was so worth that one moment of him coming up and saying that. And that's been a lot of the work for me in the institute is trusting myself. And we learn how to, we go into muscle testing, which I had been studying for many years, and we work with a pendulum and we learn medical dowsing. And all of that is about, it's about trusting. It's about trusting that the answers are coming through you, and that you can use that information. So that's been personally the biggest takeaway for me of studying at the Czech Institute. But there's so much amazing information that I also integrate, into my work with my patients.
yeah. How do you approach a patient that's trying to detox from all these meds? You know,
Mm.
that's got to be the hardest part, I think, is like to just start undoing that, and the detox element of it. Probably even for you, you could speak to how hard that was, and where do you begin, and how do you start shifting your environment while your brain chemistry is just completely out of whack?
It's so hard. The biggest things I tell people is we want to ground you in the basics, right? Eating well, moving well, sleeping well, breathing well, making sure you're getting outside, really leaning into good quality relationships. So, a lot of the times people come and their nutrition is not like they're not eating in a way that's really supporting their body. And something I love about the Czech Institute is we learn it's not, when we talk with people about food, it's not about telling them what to eat, it's teaching them how to figure out what their body needs. So I do that a lot. I take my patients to the grocery store and I'm very out of the box in that way. Right? So I take them to the grocery store. I teach them about reading ingredients, teach them about the benefit of organic food and grass-fed meat and things like that. I'll take them outside. If it's a nice day, I'm like, we're going to go to the park and do our session and take our shoes off and put our feet in the grass. So actually showing them how easy it is to do these things. So I think a lot of the times people struggle. They know they want to do it, but they can't seem to translate it into real life. So I'm like, let's just do it together. So
Mm.
making sure that they're getting healthier is the first step. If they're not doing those basic things, I think it's just too hard to start to get off the medication. And I even think about things, when they tell me in October they want to start titrating, I say, okay, now is probably not the time, especially if you live in a place that's starting to get darker earlier and it's colder. Let's prep you so as soon as spring hits, we can start this process. Obviously, it's really important that their detox pathways are open, right? That they're sleeping well, that they're sweating, that they're going to the bathroom. So we're taking those things into consideration, that they're getting good minerals, that if we need any supplementation, that they're getting that. So that's where we start. I always say, look, I'm not a medical doctor. I can't tell you what to do with the medication. What we're going to do is we're going to help your nervous system to get healthier so that when we work with your psychiatrist or whoever your prescribing doctor is, that this titration process is easier. And I always have them read Ellen Vora's book, The Anatomy of Anxiety. Have you heard of this
Hmm.
book?
I haven't.
Okay, so Ellen Vora is, Aline and I just hung out with her the other day, actually. She's wonderful. She's a functional medicine psychiatrist, and she wrote this book, The Anatomy of Anxiety, and she talks about mostly getting off SSRIs, and she's not dogmatic. What I love about her work and what I also really try to be is recognizing that everyone is so individual. There are definitely going to be people who come to me who want to stay on their medication and it helps them. Great. There are times where I've had to refer out for medication. It's not my first course of action, but there are sometimes times that we really need it. Um, but really figuring out an individualized plan. And in her book, she talks about some work around detox practices, especially using a sauna, doing coffee enemas that may help for some people. So I really encourage people to read that book and get a sense of what she suggests as a psychiatrist who's gotten many people off
Mm.
a lot of medication.
That's awesome. Who have been some other like pivotal teachers other than I know Paul Chek's been a huge influence? Is Dr. Jack Cruz one of them or who else?
Um, I well, because of Alexis, that I'm good friends
Uh-huh.
with Alexis, and she's a mentee of Dr. Jack Cruz. I've only dabbled in his work a little bit in terms of looking at it. I like a lot of things that he has to say, but I wouldn't say he's been so influential in my life yet, but only just because I have of exposure. Um,
Cool.
Definitely Paul. Ellen Vora is one of my favorites. Angie Check has been really influential in my life. When I studied Z Health, Dr. Eric Cobb for the Z Health Functional Neuroscience program, I was studying with him for 5 years. And then I will say I'm really, really fortunate to have some amazing mentors in New York City who are not necessarily like names people know about from podcasts, but they are absolutely brilliant. And they're the ones that got me into Check and got me into Z Health and all the holistic things. Uh, so I'm very fortunate in that way to have met these people and been able to learn from them.
That's amazing. And it looks like you train a lot of other practitioners as well, right? And institutes. So like
Yes.
when you approach them, what's your methodology or at least your scaffolding of how you like to share your information?
Yeah, because I've been teaching workshops now to continuing education workshops to therapists, and then also was brought in this year to the U.S. Air Force, to their mental health department, and to the New York City Department of Education, to their mental health department. So sometimes it's hard. People are definitely craving this information. Therapists want this information. I see it. They're excited about the material. The biggest obstacle they find is how do I start to integrate it into my practice? But I really start with the basics. I just teach them at a high level. This is how the brain works. Let's talk about the mind body brain connection and integration. Now it's really undeniable. You can't sit here and be like, there's no connection between our mind and body. They just want to understand, how do I integrate this into my practice? So
Mm,
doing that, and then really figuring out, where are they struggling with their patients. I'm on listservs a lot with thousands of therapists in New York City, and there's always questions around, I just saw one yesterday on post-concussion rehab, and I'm trained in post-concussion rehab. So, what work can we do with a patient who might be struggling with that? What do I do with patients who are struggling to meditate? What do I do with patients that are struggling with focus and attention and don't want to take medication? So really starting to speak to the specific questions that seem to be coming up for a lot of therapists. So that's kind of my entryway into working with them.
that's very cool. Yeah, that's got to be hard, but you're probably every time you go to one of these trainings learning how to teach so much better each time just by exposure, really.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And it's one thing to sit in classes and be the student. It's another thing to actually curate the curriculum.
I
That's
bet.
a whole
Yeah.
different thing. So that's been a really exciting process and challenging, because I do get Christed. I like to keep my workshops with the therapist really open and informal and very conversation heavy. So it's great because we all learn from each other. I leave learning a ton from these therapists too. But sometimes I get
Mm,
thrown a few curveballs in the class, and I'm like, oh, I didn't prep for this conversation, but it makes me think differently and think about how I can present the material from a different angle or perspective. So that's been a real learning opportunity and challenge, but in a way that's helping me grow and be able to teach better to more
that's
therapists.
amazing. Very
Yeah.
cool. And I was curious, even before we began this conversation, like what your initial programming was as far as your belief systems go. Did you have any kind of indoctrination, any type of religion, or how were your belief systems then and what are they now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say that my belief systems, so I grew up, I'm Jewish, and I always joke, and I hope I'm not offending any fellow Jewish people out there, but Jews love their doctors. Like we like it's like the doctor said this and that's what I'm going to do. And I think there was always a part of me, even as a child and a teenager, that was questioning things of, this doesn't always make sense, or why are we eating this way? And I grew up in a household that my mom really tried her best to be healthy, but also it was a fat-free, salt-free household because of,
Mm,
cholesterol and blood pressure and things like that. And so food was very bland. Um, and also did not help, it definitely contributed to an eating disorder. But I did have the basic foundations, like we ate whole foods, like we weren't drinking soda and eating fast food. So that definitely helped in terms of my understanding. But I did have to break away from the system of trusting the Western medical model. And in that way, I kind of became an outlier of my family and my friends also. And now I have so many people who are very like-minded in that way in my life. But it is hard to be that person. And I'm sure you have probably experienced this. It's hard to be that person among the people who, you love and trust the most. And all of a sudden you're having these thoughts and you're saying these things and you're studying these things that they think are complete wackadoo, you know? Um, so, so that's been the process, and really, like I said, working at Bellevue and starting to change my nervous system and my body and my health, but then seeing how the current system was working was really the big wake up call for me that shifted
mm.
everything.
Yeah, I think that courage to go against the hive is probably the biggest step for anything in this life, as far as like getting away from trying to just conform and fit in and not ruffle any feathers. I think that's a natural human desire, is to be accepted. And as we get older, we all have to unprogram and unlearn, which is harder than learning. And it's so hard sometimes. I myself had some weird radical transformational experiences in my late 20s, early 30s that made me want to just completely abandon society, like the
Yes.
radicalized hippie. And that's not the answer either. And there's not a lot of resources available or integration conversations happening for people that want to break out of whatever it is that they're inside of culturally. And I call that the hero's journey, you know.
Yeah.
And I feel like once people start to just gain a little courage and start to trust themselves, which is where you began this conversation, that empowerment piece, it's alienating, it's scary, but
Yeah.
that's, I feel like, where some of the biggest healing really does happen, even if it look because it looks different for each person. It could be just corporate America, or
Mhm.
it could have been that you married, you know, somebody when you were 21 and now you're in this shitty relationship that you don't really know what to do with. There's a million variables where you're like, who am I, why am I here? And it's daunting for a lot of people. And so I just think it's cool when people like yourself break out of it, find their way, and then go back and serve others, which is where it all really comes back to a holistic approach. Because if we're not sort of trying to raise the tide for everybody else or help everybody else, then it's just self-indulgent, which we see where everyone's running to the next workshop or the next biohacker event. And it's just about this narcissistic approach. And I've seen that happen a lot in the holistic healing, whether it be yoga or psychedelic spaces or spiritual communities. Not to knock on it, but it's just a natural evolution of it where people become obsessed. And
Yes.
it seems to have its own detriment to it. So I'm sure you've witnessed this in the self-healing realm.
Absolutely. I'm really glad you said that because I feel like, you're saying you break away from the mainstream kind of what's socially and culturally acceptable, start to go on this journey, and then you might end up in this other space that's very intense around holistic, whatever it is you chose, like you said, yoga or psychedelics or things like that. And I feel like, there's a lot of dogmatic thinking there. And I noticed in more recent years, sometimes when I'm hanging out with my holistic functional friends who are other practitioners in the field, there can be some shaming around, oh, well, this supplement brand is the one that you should use. And this is the way you should eat. And this is the way you should do this. And I had to also get out of that because I was shaming my friends and family around what they were doing. And that's not helpful either, because then it's just as bad as the, mainstream people who are also shaming everybody around what, how they should be acting and being and eating. So it's like, when I hang out with my holistic friends, like for the most part, we all have a very similar approach to things, but there's also differences. And I think it's really important that we all accept those differences and accept each other for where we're at and not
Hmm.
shame each other, not push each other. Because then you get caught in this system where, right, once again, like you said, everyone is, they go so hard in that area. They go so hard in the yoga. They go so hard in the psychedelics. They're taking a million supplements that they probably don't even need because, five different people told them that they should. And it's just not, it's actually really not helpful at all. And one of my favorite lines, I don't know if Ellen Vora came up with this, but I heard her say it on social media, and it was like, don't yang your yin. So
Mm.
don't take the things that are actually supposed to be yin, that are slowing you down, that are supposed to be, helping you, and just make them into a check. I have to check it off. I got to take my 10 supplements today. I have to do my yoga. I have to do my breath work. I have to, because then you're not actually present with it and it's not actually contributing to what you're trying to accomplish, which is slowing down and which is actually not accomplish anything. Slowing
Mm.
down, being in your body, and not getting so caught up in these dogmatic approaches. What is right? What is wrong? So, and that's also something that's really emphasized in the Czech Institute is when you're working with clients that are struggling, think more about what can you remove from their life rather than add into their life because they probably have
Mm.
too much.
I love that. Don't yang your yin.
Don't yang your yin.
That
I know.
seems to
I wish
be
I
that's
could.
the Western approach to everything. It seems like we do that with everything. We take it and we turn it into like a 12-step program.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like you just got to go for a walk for the sunrise, you know, and skip the gym or skip the
Yes.
traffic to get to the next yoga studio or the next workshop. And I've noticed that, like, I live in Central Phoenix. It's pretty busy here, but I ride my bike every day. I just love being on the bike, and I go to the park for sunset, and I'll just be sitting there and I enjoy just catching the sunset.
Yeah.
And I see the traffic off in the distance, and there's a freeway like pretty close by, enough to where you can just tell there's this like bustliness. And I'm just imagining all these people that are getting off work and driving in rush hour to go to some gym or some therapist or something, when they probably could have benefited maybe just from something simple as just go walk on the grass and catch a sunset, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely.
Sometimes it's the more simple stuff that feels best, but we're just so about accomplishing and doing and doing. So being is not part of our accomplishment profile here.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I have clients who come to me who are just, I just had the other day someone who came to me, and this client has way too many practitioners that they're working with. It's not so helpful that now I've been added into the mix. And I'm pretty quick to, I don't want to add more stress into someone's life. So if it doesn't make sense to work with me at this time, I want to acknowledge that. But I was like, look, I think I understand all these people are helping you, but if the ultimate goal here, if the reason that you're working with all these people is because you want to maintain health, you're just creating more chaos. You're just, you're running from one appointment to the other, and it's
Mm,
not actually cultivating that health that you're looking for. Just like you're saying, it might be better to just go walk in the grass and watch the sunset rather than rush to your workout.
yeah, that's so common. I've seen so many folks that are struggling with that, the perpetual self-help. And it's unfortunate, because then I see an interview with this guy who was 109 when he was interviewed. He died at 112, and he was called a centenarian. He survived the Great Depression. He went through so many things, and they asked him like what his lifestyle was, and it was so funny because he's like, I drink whiskey every day, I have coffee, I eat ice cream, and I'm just happy. And a lot of those folks that sort of stood the test of time and still showed up with this relationship to their experience as gratitude and appreciation, and they went through some of the worst times,
Mhm.
they had the best outcomes. And now we have all this stuff at our fingertips where we can just get caught up in the hamster wheel of, I'm going to get the best supplement and the best food.
Yeah.
And some of the happiest people had none of that access, and
Oh,
they went through real hell. Not to dismiss people's trauma or stuff that's going on now, but it is one of the easiest times in human history as far as like food, shelter, water, access to resources, and yet
definitely.
the most suffering exists, more suicides. So it's a really interesting thing, which leads me to a question for most people I ask this that are in your field. What do you think about the nature of suffering? What do you think it is?
Like, what is suffering or what
Just
causes
like,
suffering?
yeah, like when it comes to this situation, especially in the West, where we have, I guess you could call it abundance.
Yeah.
What do you think about the suffering? Because most of it is in our mind, and it's in our body, of course, but it sure seems like we're in a mental health crisis. And I'm just curious if you'd
Oh,
speak to that.
absolutely. Absolutely. So I have a lot to say on it. That's why I want to clarify uh, the specific question, but I'm going to speak more broadly. I think that a lot of our suffering has to do with our inability to sit with discomfort and be okay with it. That's one piece of it, right? So a lot of the work I do with my patients, I tell them, look, part of the human experience is that you are going to have an array of emotions. You can't, and I think Brene Brown says this in one of her early TED Talks, you can't selectively numb emotions, right? So part of our work is not trying to get rid of the sadness or get rid of the fear. It's about being able to sit with it and tolerate it and work through, let it move through you, be with it. One of the best analogies I heard was that emotions, you should treat your emotions like annoying children in the backseat of a car. You're not going to let them drive the car because they're going to crash the car, but you're also not going to put them in the trunk and lock them back there and suffocate them.
Mm,
So, so right, like, and most of us just don't know how to do the attuning to them from a place of compassion and curiosity. Instead, we do one or the other. We let them drive us, or we try to suffocate them. And we know what happens when we suffocate them. We get sick. That's when people have a lot of physical illness come up, or it's the suicidal thoughts, right? I think that, and as someone who struggled with suicidal thoughts for a long time in my life, it's this inability to sit with the discomfort. It's, I can't tolerate this. I need to get out. And of course, we don't. I tell my patients, I don't want you experiencing such extreme emotions that are so uncomfortable, that to the point that they're so debilitating that you can't operate and function in the world, that, that you're not, that you're constantly miserable. That's not what I want. And in those cases, if I don't have enough time to start to do this nervous system work with them, I may have to refer to a psychiatrist and get medication. It's really not ideal situation for me, but if I need to, I will, even though we know that there's so many other things that work just as well, if not better than medication. But if I'm in a tight time crunch and someone's like really acutely suicidal, we may have to do that. So yeah, I think there's this big component of not being able to sit with discomfort and recognize that it's not a bad thing. It is there for a reason. Those emotions are there for a reason. It's part of our human experience. It's information, but we have to be able to also sit with it and not always make immediate meaning of it and jump to conclusions about it. So that's a big part of it. And then, of course, I think the more obvious things around the social media and the comparing and the fact that we're so disconnected from ourselves and we're so disconnected from nature, and people are not able to have genuine authentic people really struggle to have genuine authentic relationships. I find, it always blows my mind when I have someone come in and they go, yeah, I've never, like more my college students or people in their 20s, like, I've never had sex sober, or I don't know how to go out with my friends and not drink or use drugs, or I am terrified of sharing this piece of information with a friend. And I think to myself, wow, like that's so much work to keep so much in and not
Mm,
be able to be your authentic self and be able to have a genuine connection. I understand that it's coming from a place of protection, but imagine if you were able to just be yourself with people, and of course that would involve rejection sometimes, right? Because we're not for everybody. But I think a lot of people are feeling lonely because even if
mm,
they're surrounded by friends, are they able to really be authentic and have really good relationships? So I think that's part of it too. And then just, jealousy and greed and wanting more and seeing a lot of, I mean, the social media thing is just, it's like we're seeing
yeah.
such a snapshot of people's lives. We have no idea what's going on under the surface or behind the scenes. And that's really creating a lot of issues too. And then we have the fixation on appearance and health and aging and not aging and all the things that we need to do to make sure that we don't look a certain way. And so it's just, I think a lot of that is contributing to these struggles
Yeah,
that
I agree. It's almost like we need to all detox from the screen thing because it's influencing our consciousness so much. And then we're the indoor culture. We're the people that are just stuck inside staring at screens. And I think just if you could just remove it for 3 to 5 or however many days and unplug, which I see in the future being like centers and places where you could go be in nature and just reset your circadian health and connect with people without distraction. Sounds so simple to just go back to being human beings, but I feel like that is the medicine right now.
that is the medicine, 1,000%. I mean, you live in a city, I live in New York City, and it is right, arguably probably one of the worst places to be for someone's nervous system. And I'll just take a long weekend and I'll go to I'll go to Florida, stay with friends or family, and just be on the beach. And I want nothing more than to just be alone on the beach and be present with myself and read and meditate. And it is so rejuvenating. And you don't, like, the focus and attention issues disappear when you do that
Hmm.
because nature is so healing. I even just notice after being there for a few days, my breath regulating, like the way I breathe, it slows down and I move slower. And there's just something so beautiful about it that happens organically when you're in nature that is
Yeah.
really hard to mimic when you're living in a concrete jungle.
Totally. Yeah, and even microdosing nature, if you live where you live. I went to New York and I remember going to Central Park and it just felt like this alleviation. It was
Yeah.
like my safe space in the city where I could go and just do breath work and get my feet on the grass. And same thing in San Francisco. I went there and I loved that big park that was downtown and everybody was playing frisbee. And so you can do that. Like even in Phoenix, I drive to this park at sunset and I love it. It's such a beautiful view and people are out walking their dogs and you can still connect with yourself in the city, even though there's certain people that say you have to move and go to Costa Rica. It's like, well, not everybody can. We're living
Right.
in a modern world, and that would be ridiculous to think that everybody should go live, in this perfect environment, when I think you can live anywhere, wherever you go, there you are, type of thing. And you can
Yeah,
find your happiness from within. So,
I completely agree. And it's always been a struggle for me because I love New York City. It's just I am I've grown. When I first moved in, it was funny. I hated it 11 years ago, and now I'm obsessed. And I've built a beautiful community here. Right, so there's part of me that's like, yeah, I could go run away and go move to the beach, but I have these amazing relationships and friendships here that I also know contribute to my quality of life. So I love that. I love like the idea of microdosing nature, which I definitely do here as well. And I think people kind of along the lines of what we were saying earlier around slowing down and not yinging your yin is that not only like what I'm saying, what happens to me when I go to the beach, that my breath slows down and I just move slower. Your body is healing in those moments. Like you don't need to do anything. Your body is so inherently intelligent that when you just give it a little drop of time in nature, there is a magical healing, ability that is happening that you don't even have to work for. That you don't have to run to the yoga class or the gym or to the chiropractor or to all these things. I'm not saying those things aren't beneficial, but this those moments in nature just can't they can't be replaced by
yeah,
supplements, you know?
totally. Yeah, I think nature trumps all of it. But
Yeah.
something you were saying there about New York City, when I went there, I remember, and I can find myself doing this, where I think it's medicinal to blow your own mind with your imagination. And I remember going up to like some cool bar on the 55th floor. I looked it up and it had a 360 view. And it was amazing because I was just this little ant on the street. And now I'm up there looking down at all these tiny little people, and there's windows everywhere. And all I did was gaze out the window for like 30 minutes. And I felt like it was on a psychedelic trip, and I was sober,
Wow.
just imagining how we built this city out of our imagination in less than a short period of time. And we built this whole thing that's going to outlive me. And all these people are living here, millions and millions of people that have big lives just like me. And so I think when we're sitting on a plane or we're in a city, we can always shift our perspective and just be in awe and wonder. And that curiosity is its own life force, where instead of it being self detriment and, oh, poor me, and why am I in this city? And there's all this smog, or you could shift your focus and be in awe, and it changes your nervous system and your state. And you are so resilient at that point. I don't think you can carry dis-ease if you're using your imagination often. So I really believe in the power of that.
Absolutely. Along those lines, so when I worked at Bellevue, I actually ran to work every single morning. So I started at Bellevue. I was beyond burnt out. I was on 4 different psychiatric medications, and I there were no windows in my office. Okay, can
Wow.
you imagine? You're sitting at the time on the I was working on the inpatient psych unit at the time. No windows, craziness, constantly dirty environment. And I let me tell you, it was a pretty dark time. And I was bad. It
That
was bad.
sounds
And
miserable.
yeah, it was pretty miserable. My mom was like, just quit. Like just quit. And I said, no, because once you have Bellevue on your resume, people know you could take any psychiatric case and you're good. You learn it all. I was like, I'm not quitting. I'm gonna stick this out at least a year, at least a year. So I would try to wake up really early and go to the gym in the morning because I knew that the movement was going to help me, especially with feeling pretty depressed. It was going to be winter very soon. And I just could not get my butt up in the morning at 5 a.m., right? It was like dark out. It just not happening. I couldn't do it. So I had this thought, I should run to work. I should run to work. It was 3.5 miles. I got a special hiking backpack. I would stuff my winter jacket. I'm not kidding you, stuff my winter jacket in this backpack. I would stuff clothes in there. I would keep shower stuff at the hospital, and I would run every morning. And it didn't matter the weather. It could be extreme heat, extreme cold. There was hail, torrential downpours, snow. I never ran in the snow. I figured out how to run in the snow. I had no idea. And I would typically take the same path to work, but I would always be looking around and I would notice things that I had never seen before, like architecture on different architecture designs on buildings. And I would just be in awe that I was running to work to one of the most famous psychiatric hospitals in the entire world. And I was like, this is actually really cool. Like,
Mm,
that's really cool that I get to do this. And that mindset shift totally got me out of burnout. That was the thing that helped me last for 5 years at Bellevue, to the point where I actually started having fun at work
that's
because I
amazing.
didn't take it so seriously,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
that goes into like Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning when he was in the Holocaust, and that
Yeah.
logos therapy component, which I think now we teach people almost like there's a, the centralized models of psychotherapy, which you're very familiar with, sort of create a victim mindset. Not to dismiss all
Yeah.
of it, but there's this like, you need to have an authority tell you what's wrong with you, and we're going to prescribe you meds, and
Yes.
you're going to be a victim. And our narrative could be what you just said, which is like, well, I'm lucky, first of all, to be alive and awake and aware. And this is my opportunity for growth. And you can go into like depth psychology and all that stuff that Jung talked about. But I'm a big fan of perspective shift and training it almost like you would train like mobility or fascia or anything. You're like, how do I just consistently play with the fucking superpower that we have, which is our narrative that has emotional response to it? It's so cool.
It is really, really cool. And that's what's helped me really. I mean, so many things have helped me shift out of this chronic state of depression and anxiety. And not to say that I don't feel sad at times or I don't feel anxious at times, but I think the biggest thing for me, especially in the last few years, has been this idea of play and changing my mindset and looking at things from a more, I don't know, just like fun perspective, or be able to laugh at things. Once again, there are very serious, like there are very serious things in the world, not everything, but to not take it so seriously and to have fun and enjoy and to be a little goofy. And so many people, I'm 37, right? And so many people my age are so afraid of getting older, especially like I'm single, and my single girlfriends are like, I'm getting, I'm single and I'm getting old and what's going to happen to me. And I feel like my quality of life has gotten so much better as I get older, because not only not only do you learn more about yourself, you learn to trust yourself more, you overcome challenges and face your fears, and in my case, getting healthier, but I'm having way more fun than I've ever had.
That's
And
great.
yeah, and it's because of the mindset shift that you're talking about,
Yeah.
and yeah.
I think that's so powerful. And a lot of the guests I ask on this show is like, what would you tell the world if you were going to die, basically today? And so many of these people, especially the older ones that are in their 70s and 80s, all just say like, have more fun or take it easy. There's always like this element to it that you're talking to, which is like, we get so serious about everything. And I think we miss the whole thing along the way to enjoy it and enjoy the ride. And I've seen you
Absolutely.
doing that on your little Instagram where you're like DJing and dancing and having fun. And it's like, that is mental health. That is, play is so
It is.
important, and
It
we
is.
forget to play.
Yes. And I didn't understand that until a few years ago, because all my life I grew up in a home where it was like, be productive, be productive. And then your nervous system is right in this constant state of going, 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 doing, doing, doing. And I'll be totally transparent. I still can be like that. I think I've slowed down a lot. My friends will be like, you still do so much, but I do a lot less than I used to. It's a work in progress. But I, the reason so the DJ thing, this is part of my fun is when I was in college, I interned at this big radio station in New York City, and I had a radio show at my college as well. But at this radio station, there would be live DJs every Friday. There would be a DJ come in and mix live, and I loved it. I was obsessed. And anytime I ever went to a party that had a DJ, a wedding, a bat mitzvah, I was always so into it. And I would always notice when the DJ was not so good, like when the mixing wasn't good, or I was like, why did they choose this song, or they let the song go for too long? So I've always wanted to learn DJing. And a few years ago, I started researching schools in New York City. And then finally, a year and a half ago, I was like, you know what? I am making the time to do this. I am going to invest financially into this, and I'm going to finally learn it. And it's
Cool.
been the best experience. It's been the best year and a half of learning something new. First of all, it's been so healing for my inner child because the fear of me, the fears I have around messing up and making mistakes, I have to face it. Like my DJ teacher constantly tells me, he said, you're going to mess up. At every gig you have, you are going to make at least one mistake. He's giving me
Yeah.
permission to make a mistake, which is something that I've always struggled with. So in itself, that's about taking it less seriously, not being so hard on myself. And then learning something new, learning about different music genres and music theory and about the equipment and the technology and, the psychology of DJing and just the creativity around it has been so fun for me. So I'm obsessed. Like I come home at night and I'll just DJ to myself in my living room. My neighbors probably hate me because it's so loud, but I have the best time doing it. And I hope that everyone can find something. And I also tell people, look, I was 36 when I discovered this. I tried so many hobbies that just did not take off. Like, it's never too late to find something you love that brings you
Mm.
joy. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
and now I get to go out and I can DJ at parties and bars and have people really enjoy the music and have fun. Like how
That's
awesome is
so
that?
That's amazing. Yeah, you can
Yeah.
tell it gives you energy. Doing things that make you feel like they're not taking, they're giving you life force energy. It's so cool.
Yes. Yes,
And
exactly.
yeah, and the failure thing, like that is what keeps so many people stuck too, is the fear of failure. Even like with teaching breath work, I remember the first time I was like, I've been doing this for 10 years, but who am I to share it? And then
Yes.
I sat with it long enough to go, well, it's actually rude of me to feel all blissed out and to learn all this shit and not be sharing it with at least my loved ones. And so
Yeah.
it's like, but you don't know how to share it because you're like, you take in a lot of information or you learn so much. And then you're like, well, how do I bring it back down to share it with like my mother or a
Mhm.
guy at work? But you have to just be willing to suck. It's like this podcast, even. I had to be willing to just go, you know what? I might just completely suck at this and maybe I'll do 10 episodes and see if I like it even. But,
Yes.
you're going to suck. It's like you have to be a white belt to get to the black belt. So
Absolutely. You have to be okay looking like a fool. And it is, I think it's the biggest thing that keeps people from pursuing their dreams. And
totally.
believe me, I struggle with it all the time. I think that what Paul Chek said to me about loving myself and trusting myself, it is, I started a YouTube channel a few weeks ago, and it's something I've thought about for a long time. And I'm terrified. I'm like, what if no one watches the videos? What if no one shows up? What if it's dumb? What if I say something and it doesn't make sense and then I put it out there? But it is really important to push yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone. You don't want to do something so extreme that it causes injury or trauma. Or, you want to go crawl back into a hole or back into your bed and never face the world again. But you want to, really get a little bit of resistance there for growth. And, I kind of felt sometimes I felt silly with this DJ thing. Like, oh my gosh, I'm actually, first of all, I was like, oh, everyone wants to be a DJ. And I just happened to finally pursue my dream, 15 years later when everyone wants to be a DJ and everyone's going to think I'm just, trying to do the cool thing, which wasn't the case. It was that I really genuinely was interested in this for so many years. But I'm always afraid of going out there and having a gig and people not liking the music, but I'm not going to let that stop me from doing it.
Mm.
And now I just got a residency at a local bar and I'm going to be there regularly and I'm so excited. And my friend said
Wow.
to me the other day, he was like, Elyse, a year ago you weren't a DJ getting gigs, like now you're a DJ getting gigs. I was like, that's actually really cool. Like, like I
It's
really saw
amazing.
this through. So yeah, I think when there's fear stopping you from living, give yourself, first of all, some compassion around it, but also, do you want it to stop you? Because we're only here, we only got one life right now. There may be other times we're here, in future lives, but like right now here, this is the one we got. And, a mentor of mine always says, it's like, we're all just going to end up in a box in the ground at the end of the day anyway. So might as well, do the
Yeah,
things you want to do while you're here, even if they're
absolutely.
cringe. Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
always say in a positive way, we're all going to be dead soon, so we might as well live, come
yeah,
alive.
yeah,
So that's really cool.
exactly. Exactly.
I'm curious what your thoughts are for health, for healing, and this holistic approach about psychedelics, psychedelic therapy, or whatever your views are on psychedelics, and if you've even used them.
Yeah, I have not used them actually. So I don't have much of an opinion on them, to be
Cool.
honest.
Yeah.
Um, I I think it's one of those things where like there can be so much benefit, and also I do wonder, is it for everybody? You know,
Totally.
I think that right now in my life, it's something I've thought about. I don't think it's the right time at the moment. I do think that I keep an open mind to it, thinking about if and when there might be a good time for me. I've seen some pretty amazing transformation in some people, some patients who have done it, and other people that are terrified and don't want to use it at that time, and maybe that fear is the reason to do it, or maybe it's not. I think it's important to
Yeah.
explore. I'm curious your perspective on this. I do, in the mental health world there's always trends, right? Just like in anything. But for a long time cognitive behavioral therapy was the hot thing to do, right? And now it's uh somatic experiencing, and internal family systems is the hot modality, right? There's always a hot modality, which I think is so
Hmm.
ridiculous. But it's usually things that are being recycled, old things that are being recycled. But there's definitely a big push around the psychedelics. There's a big market for ketamine therapy right now in New York City. And sometimes I do get concerned that is it one of these things that is being pushed on everyone, is not always good for everybody? I don't know. I'm
Mm.
curious your thoughts on that.
I have a lot of thoughts on that to where it could be a whole podcast, but I found benefit with them, and I luckily found some good teachers and mentors and books and all the things to integrate it over time. And I don't recommend them, um, but I can see the incredible impact that they can have and the transformational capacity there. And I think that right now there's a lot of investors and sort of bad actors involved in the space especially with ketamine and the big pharmaceutical industries and the funders. And I know a lot about psychedelic history just because I think it's fascinating to learn about. And I think it's going to go off the rails. And I think it's going to come back to a healthy balance over time. But I think right now we're in the super swing the other way. And there's going to be a lot of problems, especially with ketamine. I know plenty of people addicted to ketamine and it's ruining bladders. And I've also met people where they said it changed their life. But so I know there's potential there, but I also see thousands of people hopping in for profit and a lot of propaganda being deployed and talking about psychedelics in a certain way without understanding the full spectrum. So,
Yes, yes. And I can't tell you how many of these ketamine clinics are popping up in New York City.
yeah.
It's really
It's
scary.
just to me, it reminds me of the Oxycontin epidemic, where it was pain management clinics popping up everywhere. And this is the psychological pain management clinics popping up, and we're going to go and disassociate and anesthetize you. And of course, it feels good temporarily. It's almost the perfect drug for the American culture to just get away from it. And it actually can be incredibly beneficial when someone has incredible trauma, if they've come back from war or something and they're in the right container. But I see a lot of downside to it, and I don't think people like to hear that because there's a lot of glorification of it. But
There's a lot of glorification of it. Absolutely, absolutely. And I just, with all these things, we have to have some balance,
yeah,
and take a nuanced stance on things. I don't think it's helpful for anybody when a practitioner just says, well, this is the right way to do things, or this is the my one size fits all approach that has helped everybody,
mm,
because we're all so different. And as soon as a practitioner, I'm so picky with who I refer to, when I collaborate with colleagues. And as soon as I'll always try to talk to the practitioner first. And as soon as they reference anything around being a one size fits all approach, I'm like, I need to know
yeah,
more about this, because I don't know, like, if I can send someone to you if that's the mindset,
yeah,
like, so yeah, I'm glad you said that, or like you can really see it going in a place that might not be so good. And I think these things can be very sacred experiences and sacred medicine, and they need to be approached that way and not kind of used willy-nilly.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's not a one size fits all thing, and it's a very powerful subject because when you start to tamper with psychedelics, you are changing consciousness so rapidly.
Yeah.
And I think creating a suggestibility state, and then if you have TikTok and all the programming around you, it creates the opportunity for certain people to, the MK Ultra programs to become 2.0 or 5.0 or whatever the
Yeah.
model is now, to completely distract and uh, cause a lot of problems and harm and programming in the wrong direction. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's like, we're always right. I think the goal is to always distract us so we don't actually pursue the things that we're meant to be pursuing.
yeah,
So
totally.
if we get sucked into it, it's really easy to get off course around what you're, here to do in this world.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that. I had my first guest on this podcast was Robert Forte, who was one of the few people that helped me to see that in the 1960s we thought the hippie movement was like this radical thing where we broke free from the 1950s. And then I started to hear the stories about the distractible component and how they were deployed into the culture on purpose to get everybody to be distracted. And I see that happening now. But I don't want to get too sucked into the psychedelic conversation, but that seems to happen sometimes with me. There was one thing I wanted to ask you about breath work. Do you ever have like a basic thing that you could share with people, even in this moment, like what a basic technique is that you think helps most to downregulate the nervous system?
Yeah, as simple as taking a very basic thing is just taking a straw and making a longer exhale, inhale through your nose and then put the straw in between your lips and just a nice long exhale out of the straw to slow the exhale down. Because I get into, and I'm sure you do too, around uh, breathing anatomy with people and making sure that they can breathe into different respiratory muscles and showing them all different types of breath work. But I think that's a very simple, easy, cheap thing that you can do is, just cut a piece of a plastic straw and just breathe out of it. Um, when people are excessively anxious and they can't slow down and do calming breath work, what I have them do is something a little bit more activating. So it's something I learned in my Z Health functional neuroscience curriculum called air hunger, where I have the person inhale and then exhale. So they hold their breath out at the bottom of the exhale. They don't breathe in again. And then they do some sort of body weight exercise. So they can do jumping jacks, they can do push-ups, they can do squats, they could just walk around the room, and they're doing that exercise while they're holding the breath on the exhale out. So they haven't, typically people hold their breath in, they inhale and hold. This is exhale and hold. And I have them do that exercise until they feel the need to breathe in again. And then they stop the exercise and then just very gently through their nose take a few deep breaths to recover. And the reason that's really helpful is because when people are hyperventilating, they're really stressed out or having a panic attack, they're driving too much oxygen into their system. Like their inhale is very big, right? It's like, and their exhale is very small. So this way we're swapping it and we're driving more carbon dioxide into the system when they do that. And also they're getting movement, which is going to help as well. And they have this come down because they've now been more activated. Now they're going to come down. And almost always people feel a lot calmer after doing 2 or 3 rounds of that exercise.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, so now this is the question. You've probably heard me ask this. If you were going to die today and there was nothing that you had written or done online, is there something you'd like to share with the world?
Be present. The thing that's coming to me is be present in your life with the things that you love and think about how do I like this sounds a little cliche, but if I'm on my deathbed, what do I want to have done? What is 1 or 2 or 3 things that I would have regretted that I didn't do in this life? And start to think about how am I going to implement them now? You know, what how do I want to live and how do I want to be in this moment? And what is it that I can contribute to the world? And we get so caught up, I'm guilty of this too, getting so caught up in the day-to-day hustle and grind that we forget. We forget what's important to us. And I forgot for so long. I was working so much. I was working at Bellevue. I was personal training. I was studying neuroscience out in Arizona. I mean, I was traveling, I was traveling nonstop. I was working 6 to 7 days a week, and I lost sight of what was important to me. You know, I wasn't spending time with friends the way I wanted to. I wasn't showing up to family things in the way that I wanted to. And the biggest shift was starting to realize, like, I want to invest in my relationships in the way that they really matter. I want to invest in things that are important to me and learn things and grow myself and have new skills and challenge myself and not be afraid of the discomfort, not be afraid of emotions that feel scary or feel difficult to be with, you know. And now when I start to feel anxious or I start to feel sad or I start to feel grief, I allow myself to slow down and sit with it and be with it and not judge it. And if you can do that, if you can feel fear, if you can feel sadness, if you can feel grief and sit with it and not let it define you, but really be with it, I think you can go and do anything because you're
Mm.
not letting the fear stop you. You're not letting the sadness stop you. You're like, I'm going to actually be with this. I'm going to process it. I'm going to acknowledge it. I'm not going to suffocate it, like throwing the kids in the backseat of the car, but I'm going to let it move through me and I'm going to be with it. But it's not going to stop me from pursuing my dreams and living my life. So that would be the thing I would say is, you know, figure out what your dreams are. That's a big check thing. You know, what is your dream is one of the biggest things he has us talk about with clients. Figure out what your priorities are and how you want to spend time, and find a way to learn how to be with discomfort so you can allow it to move through you, but not let it stop you from doing the things that you love
Mm.
and not being
That's
afraid of it.
beautiful. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And it's been really fun connecting with you today. So
You too, Ryan. Thank you so much for having me. And so such thought-provoking questions as well.
awesome. Well, it's been an honor. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it and subscribe to the show and rate the show. That helps people to discover it. And enjoy the next episode.
What we call reality is in fact nothing more than a culturally sanctioned and linguistically reinforced hallucination.